Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hello, here I am. Hi, how are you, everybody? It's today is November 25th, Wednesday, November 25th, 2020. It's the day before Thanksgiving. Hopefully you're not going anywhere, and no one you know is going anywhere. Everybody's staying home. I don't know, or maybe you have some sort of arrangement to have separate isolation domes for each member of your family, and somehow you're going to, I don't know how you're going to throw the turkey through those windows, but I guess anything is possible. So, what are you doing today? Is it a preparation day for you? It's probably not a travel day, so that's good. I've been thinking about what to do with the day tomorrow. I mean, I'll be here. I'll be around. You'll be around. Nothing to do. I was thinking I might try and keep you company on Thanksgiving Day, but I don't know. Will there be any news? Will Trump be flying somewhere to... I guess one more thumb in the eye of the authorities, having a large family gathering Thanksgiving somewhere just to show that he's the biggest super spreader of them all and he doesn't care. I don't really know. I have no idea. Well, I guess we'll monitor the situation as time goes on. The Kagro in the Morning radio show, however, either way, no matter what happens, is live now. Bill knows it. You know it, Bill knows it, the American people know it, and we're ready to go. Let's see. It's going to be me and Greg today, and, well, the prediction here is that we'll fight over the pre-Thanksgiving wishbone. You even do that. We're going to just reach straight through the turkey's chest and just rip it out of him. Well, I guess like Sarah Palin might have done when she was interviewed in front of the turkeys being slaughtered. All right, pre-Thanksgiving wishbone. Okay, well, what happens next shocks everybody in the room. True. Click here. Turkeys hate it. The one thing turkeys don't want you to know about how vulnerable they are to having their wishbone snatched out while still alive. Okay, let's see. Lots to cover today. Let's see. I don't know what the biggest, baddest news out there is. That Trump is getting ready, I guess, to the extent that he gets ready for anything, to pardon notorious spy Mike Flynn, confessed felon as well. So that's kind of fun. I don't know. I'm a little disappointed that might happen, and someone should tell him, if you pardon Flynn, you rehabilitate Sidney Powell. Although I don't know whether he might be interested in rehabilitating Sidney Powell, but that's the lawyer that he just chucked off of his team, but is representing Flynn, and she gets to hang that outside her door as a prize, I guess. I don't know. If you're a convicted felon and an international spy and a traitor lieutenant general, perhaps you would like to come by and get your pardon from our pardon shop under Sidney Powell's guidance. I don't know. We'll see how that one works out. I imagine. I don't know whether he's going to make him wait until the last hours of his presidency or do it now, or I guess it's a wait-and-see game. Greg knows all about it. I don't know that matters to Greg, but it matters, but I don't know if it's going to be on your list. Good morning, Greg. Tell us what is on your list. That way we can
I got a bunch of things on our list, but I think we're doing this wrong. I just came to the conclusion we're just doing this all wrong.
Well, what?
We're not grifting. We should be grifting. We should be selling indulgences. Yes. We should be selling pardons.
That's right, even if I can't give it to you.
I have an idea for a business. We can sell what I call democratic desks. They're desks you can hide under, with a little refrigerator underneath and, snacks and
it's nice.
A little toaster oven for Pop-Tarts. You can do all that stuff underneath.
With a mini bar
we're not doing it right. Empires will rise and fall based on this great scheme we have here. But I don't have all of the elements in place. I tried to book a room at the Four Seasons to announce this, but it turned out to be Four Seasons Total Landscaping.
Right.
And it turns out that's booked, which is really too bad because you may not know this, but the Pennsylvania Republican
How could I not
establishment is having a big announcement, a big meeting today. Very important. It's official.
So they say.
Except it's not happening in Lansing.
Well, no.
It's not happening in Philadelphia
or anywhere.
It's happening in Gettysburg.
That's true. They say it is.
And Rudy Giuliani is leading the charge there. The hearing will take place on Wednesday, November 25th at 12:30 p.m. at the Wyndham Hotel in Gettysburg.
Windy Ham Hotel.
Yeah, well, it's actually going to be the Wyndham Total Landscaping because the Wyndham Hotel was booked. The public is invited to watch the event live on the Majority Policy Committee's website, but it's not in the legislature. It's not in a hearing room. It's not a meeting. It's not a official.
It's a field
and yet
hearing.
Trump is rumored to show up there.
That's cool. Yeah, it's a short helicopter ride, like going to Camp David. He can make it happen.
And they're going to discuss irregularities in the Pennsylvania vote that has already been certified. So, this is how you grift. We just don't do it right.
Yeah, I don't know what the money is in it, but I don't know. I guess there's just people that give you money.
Do a fundraiser after that, and then he's going to send a lot of letters to his loyal base who aren't quite as loyal as they used to be. And they're going to say that we really need the money so we can continue to fight for your election results that have already been certified so that it's already over. But we're not going to tell you that. We're going to tell you, give us money, and we'll just put that money in our pocket. And I'm telling you, we just are missing stuff here.
Well, look, I guess you can raise money that way forever from people who blame Barack Obama for 9/11. Chronology, not really their thing.
Yeah,
they're not horologists.
So here's how it's going in the real world. This is Martin Pengelly in The Guardian. Fox News' Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson distanced themselves from Trump. I saw Laura Ingraham actually tell her audience that Joe Biden's going to be the president on January 20th, and I can't lie to you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, it's good for business. They get somebody to attack. I don't know why they were upset about that.
Yeah,
good. Okay.
So there's that. Julian Zelizer, this is stuff from the Pundit Roundup. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this wonderful story by Tim Alberta about what happened in Michigan. But this is Julian Zelizer. Trump's attempt to overturn the election failed, but things to remember. POTUS tried to overturn the election while most Republicans supported him. It's time to turn to the transition, but not turn the page. This was unprecedented and dangerous. It was also a partisan thing. So let's mention a couple of things about transition. This Axios story says Republicans quietly plot to sink Biden nominees.
All right.
They're making plans to torpedo the prospective cabinet.
Sure, why not?
People like Sally Yates and Alexander Vindman, because it's important that the Republicans be nasty and petty and vindictive, because that's who they are under Trump. That's what the party has become, and so they have to keep their brand up. And some leaked names are, quote, really objectionable, end quote, like Vindman. Now, between the lines, Axios says, of course, this doesn't mean doom to such nominees. Even if the GOP did retain a bare majority of control after two remaining runoffs in Georgia, a few Republicans could cross party lines. I'd love to see Romney and Murkowski and even Collins vote for Sally Yates for Attorney General. That'd be great.
I'd take it.
But we'll see how that happens.
Yes.
And, meanwhile, of course, we have this hearing that they haven't given up yet. Another thing that they're doing, which is petty and vindictive, Steve Mnuchin plans to put $455 billion beyond Janet Yellen's easy reach. Basically, by withdrawing it, she makes it so you have to go back to the Congress to get the money again. And with a Republican Congress, they'll just say, no, you can't have it.
Okay.
So, the point is that a lot of their constituents will die. This is a rural pandemic right now.
Oh, well.
But they don't care.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm torn between adopting their position, not caring, and being human. All right. Well, okay, I care.
I'll go with being human, but it's a tough call there.
Right. I'll come around to it. Don't worry about it. I'll help you out. It's, don't die.
Monday,
everybody.
we had this whole piece about Carrie Cordero saying this will be an unpopular take, but one thing I can say after 4 years of speaking privately with some current and former Trump appointees is that some of them truly internally struggle and personally anguish over the rules and decisions. She says, I don't believe it.
Okay.
Just Emily Murphy play out. And she decided to certify after Michigan certified, which is why the Monday Michigan story was so big. We had the Monday morning show, but by the end of the day, it really felt like that was the day that the Trump administration capitulated. Michigan certified, and following that, Emily Murphy said, okay, you can have the money, you can do a formal transition. And that was all well and good.
Well,
but the fact that it was put off all this time is ridiculous, and that is not redemption.
No, it doesn't count, and people will be hurt and killed as a result, and if you struggle with it, so much the better. I don't feel bad about that. Good for you.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about Michigan. There is this piece in Politico by Tim Alberta. It's very long.
All right.
But I think it's really, really
Even your
worth
excerpt is
over
long.
some detail because it's just so good and gives you an idea what's going on here.
That does sound good.
And
okay.
set the stage.
Oh.
Jake Tapper had a tweet, again in the Pundit Roundup. Let's take a moment to acknowledge 4 Republican officials who, despite pressure from the president and his party, remained allegiant to facts and truth and democracy and integrity and math.
Oh, what a bunch of losers. Okay.
There was Amish Schmidt, Republican who certified the Philadelphia vote.
Oh, okay.
Georgia Secretary of State, who under pressure,
Raffensperger,
a lot of pressure from 2 senators, and Trump said nonetheless it's a fair election, and Biden won, even though I don't like it.
Yeah.
Even put an op-ed in the USA Today to say so.
USA. I mean, not just one state today.
Christopher Krebs,
Yes.
who was fired for saying the election's fair.
Right.
And then the fourth one that we're going to talk about is not a household name, somebody you probably didn't know before now.
Doesn't even have a Twitter handle, it looks like.
And his name is Aaron Van Langeveld.
Okay.
And I can't find where the tweet was, but somebody said this morning,
Van Pelt.
2016, I said, yay, I voted. And in 2020, I can tell you what the canvassing board members are having for lunch on Thursday at 3 p.m.
True.
That's true.
Yeah, people got into
find
it.
that tweet. Somebody actually said it's so true, right? And now we
Please
know
do
who all
find
these
it.
people are. And it turns out that when they're your friends and neighbors, and the poll workers are your friends and neighbors, as we saw in Michigan, it's just so much harder to demonize them and say, "Oh, you're crooks."
I'm friends with
Do it.
demons.
And even the partisan Republicans couldn't do it. They could say that all they want to about people in Washington, but when you're talking about your friends and neighbors, it doesn't work.
All right.
So this is a story about Aaron Van Langeveld and others in Michigan. Van Langeveld is a conservative you never heard of. He was the other Republican canvassing board member besides the highly partisan and nutter Norm Scherkel.
The state guy.
The state level.
All right.
And he, along with the 2 Democrats at state level, voted 3-1.
Yes.
3 with 1 abstention, as it turns out, because it's illegal to vote no. So Norm Scherkel, the nutcase, abstained,
vote
but
no.
Aaron Van Langeveld joined the other 2 at state level to certify the Michigan election and say it's over.
All right.
So that's the inside story of Michigan's fake voter fraud scandal by Tim Alberta in Politico. How a state that was never in doubt became a national embarrassment and a symbol of the Republican Party's fealty to Donald Trump. That's why it's worth going over.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Some of these details may not have been known. Okay, and so just the jump to the good part here. In the end, it wasn't a senator or a judge or a general who stood up to the leader of the free world. There was no dramatic, made-for-Hollywood collision of cosmic egos. You know, it wasn't Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Rather, the death knell of Trump's presidency was sounded by a baby-faced lawyer looking over his glasses on a grainy Zoom feed on a gloomy Monday afternoon, reading from a statement that reflected a courage and moral clarity that has gone AWOL from his party, pleading with the tens of thousands of people watching online to understand that some lines can never be uncrossed. We must not attempt to exercise power we simply don't have, declared Van Langeveld, a member of Michigan's Board of State Canvassers, the ministerial body with sole authority to make official Joe Biden's victory over Trump. As John Adams once said, we're a government of laws, not men. This board needs to adhere to that principle here today. This board must do its part to uphold the rule of law and comply with our legal duty to certify this election, contrast and compare, for example, to people like Jen Ellis or Rudy Giuliani, or Sidney Powell or Donald Trump or Mike Pompeo or Marco Rubio or anybody you can name on the Republican Party at Washington level. And in particular, Linda Cox, the head of the Republican Party in Michigan at state level. Van Langeveld is a Republican. He works for Republicans in the State House. He gives legal guidance to advance Republican causes and win Republican campaigns. As a Republican, his mandate for Monday's hearing, handed down from the state party chair, that's Linda Cox, the national party chair, that's Romney McDaniel, who is running again for party chair because, she's totally loyal to Trump and wants a job. I guess she's not qualified for anything else. I don't know why anybody would want that job. And the president himself was straightforward. They wanted Michigan's board of canvassers to delay certifications of Biden's victory. Never mind that Trump lost by more than 154,000 votes, or that results were already certified in all 83 counties. The plan was to drag things out, to further muddy the election waters and delegitimize the process, to force the courts to take unprecedented actions that would forever taint Michigan's process of certifying elections. Not because it was going to help Trump win, but because it was going to help Trump cope. The president wasn't accepting defeat. That meant no Republican with career ambitions could accept it either. That's really the key part here.
I think so.
Right? Anybody who is a career Republican who gets on the wrong side of Trump's fantasies is at risk, which this will make clear. What made Van Langeveld's vote for certification all the more remarkable, with the other Republican on the four-person board, Norm Schinkel, abstaining on the final vote, a cowardly abdication of duty, the 40-year-old Van Langeveld delivered the verdict on his own. At a low point in his party's existence, with much of the GOP's leadership class pre-writing their own political epitaphs by empowering Trump to lay waste to the country's foundational democratic norms, an obscure lawyer from West Michigan stood on principle. It proved to be the nail in Trump's coffin. Shortly after Michigan's vote to certify, GSA finally commenced the official transition of power, and Trump tweeted out a statement affirming the move in the best interest of our country. But still, the drama in Lansing raised deeper questions about the health of our political system and the sturdiness of American democracy. Why were Republicans who privately admitted Trump's legitimate defeat publicly alleging massive fraud? Why did it fall to a little-known figure like Van Langeveld to buffer the country from an unprecedented layer of turmoil? Why did the battleground state that dealt Trump his most decisive defeat, that would be Michigan, by a wide margin, become the epicenter of Americans' electoral crisis? In conversations with more than 24 Michigan insiders, elected officials, party elders, consultants, activists, it became apparent how the state's conditions were ripe for this sort of slow-motion disaster. Basically, Michigan's home to Detroit, majority black city. It's always been a favorite punching bag of white Republicans. The state had viral episodes of conflict and human error that were easily manipulated and deliberately misconstrued. And for the president, it had the potential to settle an important score with his adversary, Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Remember, we've already established during the transition that petty and vindictive is the GOP brand.
Yeah. Well, long before that.
It is long before that, but it's so clear now. Perhaps most important, Trump's allies in Michigan proved to be more career-obsessed and therefore more servile to his whims than GOP officials in any other state he's cultivated during his presidency, willing to indulge his conspiratorial fantasies in ways other Republicans weren't. Alberta's from Michigan, so he feels this especially acutely.
I guess so. I wouldn't say maybe Wisconsin was another good shot, but okay.
And Wisconsin was a much closer election, but they were way further away from being able to do this.
It's odd, though. I would have thought that with that they'd been so heavily gerrymandered that the state-level politicians might jump on board, and I don't know. Okay.
Plus, both Michigan and Wisconsin Supreme Courts have been known to be a little partisan now and again.
Right. But okay, Michigan, good focus.
Michigan. Turned out to be Michigan. This, Republicans and Democrats here agreed, was the essential difference between Michigan and other states. However sloppy Trump's team was in contesting the elections in places like Georgia and Wisconsin, where the margins were fractional, this was at least some plausible justification of a legal challenge. The same could never be said for Michigan. 154,000 votes.
Yeah.
The president's efforts here were aimed not at overturning the results, but rather at testing voters' faith in the ballot box and Republicans' loyalty to him. That's why this was such a disaster. The whole entire episode in Michigan, Norm Shirkey and Monica Palmer at the Wayne County level, who decided that Livonia White area non-matching of the vote totals was no big deal, but in Detroit, where it's black, you have to exclude them.
Right.
You know,
Even though it was
but
less.
not Livonia, even though
I
Livonia had
remember.
worse non-matching numbers, which are, by the way, all explained by human error, and that's the point of canvassing.
Yeah.
But they took that to mean this is our excuse to disenfranchise Detroit. We hate Detroit. It goes on to say, and this all comes, people have to understand this. This all comes from not properly funding election structure, infrastructure. Just the same way people don't fund public health, and then it comes back to bite you in things like pandemics. If you don't pay for election infrastructure and your particular legislature refuses, like Florida, to count early so that you can get yourself out of the mess of this is going to take forever. Mm-hmm. Florida fixed that since 2000, whether you want to credit Jeb Bush or Charlie Crist. The fact is Florida counts early, and so you know what's going on. In Michigan, the GOP legislature refused to allow counting early and refused to put the money up for election infrastructure so that when human errors with unpaid and poorly trained people all over the state, especially in rural white Republican areas, but also in Detroit, when these errors happen, then you point to them and say, look, it's fraud. It's something you brought upon yourself because you didn't take the trouble to fix things early.
Yes.
And so the whole point here is by setting it up to fail, you then have a situation where you can say, well, it's got nothing to do with the vote total. It's the fact that elections themselves can't be trusted. That's what they did here. And that's why a lot of Republicans and conservatives, like Tim Alberta, are upset about it. What they did is that he was never going to succeed in altering the outcome, but he was trying to make people lose faith in the election itself. Now, why you want to do that in a place like Georgia, where you got Republicans running to keep control of the Senate, I don't know.
That doesn't matter.
Did. So Tim says Trump failed to win Michigan, but he succeeded in convincing America that a loss, no matter how conclusive, may never again be conclusive enough. Mm-hmm. Even though, if you talk to the poll workers and the veteran clerks and the nonpartisans and your friends and neighbors in Michigan, they'll tell you this is like the smoothest election they've had in years and years and years and years.
All right.
But because state law prohibited the processing of absentee votes until 7 a.m. on Election Day, preventing workers from getting a head start with the time-consuming work of opening envelopes, removing ballots, preparing them for tabulation, everybody understood the state would face a historic backlog of votes to count once the polls closed at 8 p.m.
Yes.
And this was the source of a months-long dispute between the Democratic governor, the Democratic Secretary of State, and by the way, folks, those local elections are so important. We saw why. And the Republicans who control both House and Senate in Lansing, Whitmer and Benson's the Secretary of State, warned the GOP leaders that a protracted counting process, especially in the scenario of a competitive election, would invite chaos. And other states that Trump carried in 2016, like Ohio and Florida, allowed for pre-canvassing of absentee and other mail-in ballots. Michigan did not do the same. The Republicans, House Speaker Lee Chatfield and Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey, the two guys who went to Washington on Friday to meet with Trump, weren't interested. Spooked by Trump's continued assault on mail voting and aware that their own members in the legislature were distrustful of the new no-excuse absentee rules, because remember, Republicans don't want people to vote. They only want their people to vote. Right. Chatfield and Shirkey weren't inclined to do the process any favors, only in the late stages of the race, when Republican State Senator and former Secretary of State Ruth Johnson suggested a meager concession, allowing 10 hours of absentee ballot processing before Election Day, did the GOP throw a bone to election workers. And it's helpful to understand the party's logic. Not only did they want to avoid the perception of aiding a system the president was attacking as illegitimate, in other words, they were all in on delegitimizing the election. That's the basis for all of their problems here. And not only were they skeptical of the Democrats' concerns of a drawn-out count, many Republicans didn't believe the election would be terribly close to begin with. The common expectation was that the president would lose comfortably by 4 or 5 points, which is a margin that would render any controversy about absentee voting meaningless. But that thinking changed abruptly about 10 p.m. on election night because the red mirage happened. President searched with durable lead and then started complaining that all of a sudden those late votes are changing everything.
Right.
And again, what does that mean? Because you don't fund the election infrastructure, the big population areas like Detroit take forever to count, and so the vote comes in late. We see this in Connecticut when the Bridgeport vote comes in late. And inevitably what happens is the Republicans who are ahead and then lose because the Democratic late votes come in, get all pissy about it and say, oh, they waited until they saw how many votes they needed, and then all of a sudden those votes appear and then we lose. And God damn it happens every single time, and I hate them.
Yes. Well,
and that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is you refuse to pay to have it done properly, and you won't pass the legislation to allow it to happen in a timely manner. And so that's how it goes. The bigger areas with less funding and only one machine and not enough people to count take a long time to vote, and so it comes in later. Duh.
Right. Yeah, I don't know why they don't understand it, but they choose not to.
And so I don't want those black areas outvoting us, and it happens every election, and I hate it. That's basically their attitude.
Yes.
In Connecticut, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Georgia, it's everywhere. And that's the Republican Party for today. That's my rant. But, you know, it's just so obvious now because when the Wayne County Board of Canvassers had their opportunity to do their ministerial function and just say, yeah, that's what happened. They said, oh, we only have doubts about the black areas. Wisconsin's doing the recount only in the black areas. Folks, this is what's going on. And that's why it's such a tragedy.
Yeah, they really gave it away on that one. We'll see whether they react the same way that Florida and Ohio did. Florida and Ohio found themselves at the center of vote counting controversies and found a fix for it. I don't know whether Michigan is next or whether they really enjoyed being at the center of controversy. I guess we'll find out in like 2 years or 2 minutes. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show now, here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin still with us. There was more to the story, I understood, on our way out the door.
Well, you know, it's important that you get to know these household words. You know, it isn't just the Board of Canvassers and what they had for lunch at 3:30 on Thursday. It's the fact that this Michigan, GOP is a. This is the home of Betsy DeVos.
True. Yes. Right. Good point.
You know, I mean, this is a really Trumpy GOP before Trump. So as Tim Alberta tells the story of what happened on Election Day, he says the thinking changed about 10 p.m. on election night as the president surged to a durable lead in Florida. Defying expectations, Michigan Republicans were gripped by equal parts of euphoria and panic. It was clear Trump was running far more competitively than they'd anticipated in Florida, Ohio, and North Carolina. But those states tally their ballots quickly. That means the spotlight's going to be on slow counting Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, the 3 states where the Republican legislature refused to allow counting early.
Yeah.
Now, everybody knew this had been a possibility, says Tim Alberta, but it wasn't until midnight that the urgency of the situation crashed over Republicans. Trump had built a lead of 300,000 votes on the strength of same-day ballots, and now with the eyes of the nation and the president fixed on the state, Michigan Republicans scrambled to protect that lead. This is the Brooks Brothers riot of 2000, writ large, played with everybody watching, knowing what was going to happen so that it has a lot less effectiveness because you can't claim it's grassroots now.
Right, that's true.
Right, that's what's going on here. Laura Cox, chair of the state party, began dialing prominent lawmakers, attorneys, and activists, urging them to get down to the TCF Center, the main hub of absentee vote counting in Detroit. And I know people who were there, and basically everything she's going to say is a lie. She was met with some confusion. There was already plenty of Republicans there, as scheduled. Remember, the complaint is they wouldn't let us in.
Right.
Well, there were already people there. They were working their shifts as poll challengers. It didn't matter to Cox. It was time to flood the zone. This was also predictable, said Josh Venable, who ran Election Day operations at the Michigan GOP during 5 different cycles. Detroit's always been the boogeyman for Republicans since before I was born. It's been the white suburbs versus Detroit, the white west side of the state versus Detroit. There's always this rallying cry from Republicans. We win everywhere else and lose Wayne County. I remember hearing back on my first campaign in 2002, Wayne County always releases its votes last so that Detroit can see how many votes Democrats need to win the state. That's what a lot of Republicans here believe.
Yeah.
And they believe it about Bridgeport and Hartford and Connecticut, too. As things picked up at the TCF Center, with more and more white Republicans filing into the complex to supervise the activity of mostly black poll workers, Chris Thomas noticed a shift in the environment, having been brought out of retirement to supervise the counting in Detroit. The decision met with cheers from Republicans and Democrats alike. Thomas had been thrilled with the professionalism he'd witnessed during Monday's pre-processing session.
Mm-hmm.
And Tuesday's vote tabulating. Now, in the early morning hours of Wednesday, things are going sideways. Groups of Republican poll challengers clustering around individual counting tables in violation of the rules. People were raising objections, such as the transferring of military absentees onto ballots that could be read by machines, which is a standard practice, that betrayed a lack of preparation. Reading the affidavits afterwards from the Republican poll challengers, I was just amazed at how misunderstood the election process was to them. The things they said were going on, like, hey, that's exactly what's going on. That's what's supposed to go on.
Yeah, they're counting. What are they doing?
Right? Yeah. The Trump team's much celebrated lawsuit against Detroit was recently withdrawn after being pummeled in local courtrooms. His campaign that to date won 1 case and lost 35. And then at one point, Thomas supervised the receiving of Detroit's final large batch of absentee ballots. They arrived in a passenger van. Thomas confirmed the numbers he'd verified over the phone, 45 trays, each tray holding 300 ballots for a total between 13,000 to 14,000 ballots. And not long after, Charlie Spees, an attorney for the U.S. Senate campaign of John James, approached Thomas and said he wanted to know about the 38,000 absentee ballots that just materialized. And Thomas told him there's not 38,000, it's 15. And Spees said, I was told the number was 38,000, which wasn't true. So John James went on to say, and we've talked about this, that I refuse to concede because funny things happened in Detroit. What happened in Detroit is they hate John James.
I see. That is funny.
And those votes came in, and he didn't win. So now the cushion is down to about 70,000 from 300,000. The math is not workable for the president. Biden overtakes Trump about 9:30 a.m. the next day, and suddenly, after 24 hours of letting the democratic process work, Republicans around the country began crying foul and screaming conspiracy.
Yes. And
no state cornered the hysteria market quite like Michigan. And he talks about some of the details. But the true insanity was saved to Detroit. By early afternoon, hundreds and hundreds of Republicans had descended upon the TCF Center. That's what I mean about the organized Brooks Brothers riot, like in 2000.
Right.
Where Brett Kavanaugh cut his teeth. Responding to an all-hands-on-deck missive that went out from the state party and was disseminated by local officials, Cox, the party chair, tweeted out a video of her comrades standing outside the locked-up downtown building. Republican poll challengers blocked from entering. Well, this is egregious, she wrote. Well, truly egregious was Cox's dishonesty. At the time of her tweet, several hundred of her party's poll challengers were already inside, more than they were supposed to be. By law, Republicans were allowed to have 134 challenges, one for each tabulation table, and they had far more than that inside. But because of the overflow, election officials ultimately decided to lock down the complex and put cardboard over the glass so that the outside hundreds of others banging on the windows to disturb the vote counters couldn't be seen. And the Republicans got upset about that.
Yes.
And that's what their claim was. That was the basis of their complaint about fraud. That was the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was nothing else.
Well, it's that's the basics of the Brooks Brothers riot strategy. If you can't actually disrupt the count because they're dedicated to doing the count because it's their job, you do things that are distracting and or threatening to them, whatever you can do from wherever they put you. And then if the counters then either distance themselves or otherwise shield themselves from the distraction and threats, you say, "What are you hiding?"
Right. So then this
easy.
brings us to our middle of the night Trump addressing the nation from the White House, if you remember, insisting the election had been stolen from him. And he returned time and time again to alleged misconduct in Michigan's biggest city, Detroit, which we just went over.
Right.
Okay. He alleged, Trump, that Republicans had been denied access to observe any counting and they didn't want anybody seeing the counting. All of this is a lie. Republicans here, from Ronna Romney McDaniel to Laura Cox, the federal and local lawmakers knew it was a lie, but they didn't lift a finger in protest as the president disparaged Michigan and subverted Americans' democratic norms. Why? First, there's zero evidence to substantiate widespread voter fraud. Second, they couldn't afford to admit it publicly. And Ronna McDaniel is a perfect case in point. She's born into Michigan royalty, granddaughter of the beloved former Governor George Romney, niece of former presidential nominee Mitt Romney. She knows the state's politics as well as anybody. She spun and exaggerated and played the game, but she's generally viewed as being above board, and that changed after Trump's 2016 victory. Tapped by the president-elect to take over the Republican National Committee on the not-so-subtle condition she remove Romney from her professional name, McDaniel morphed into an archetype of the Trump-era GOP sycophant.
Yes.
No lie too outlandish to parrot, no behavior too unbecoming to justify, no abuse of power too flagrant to enable. Longtime friends worried McDaniel wasn't merely humiliating herself. She seemed to be changing in private. If anything, she was turning into a true MAGA believer. And so there was some relief when in recent weeks McDaniel told multiple confidence she doubted there was any scalable voter fraud in Michigan. But she went and stayed the course with Trump, stayed with the team. This wasn't about indulging him, she said, but rather about demonstrating a willingness to fight, even when the fight can't be won.
Okay.
Now, if this sounds illogical, McDaniel's thinking is quite linear. The RNC will vote in January on the position of chair, and she wants to keep the job.
Why?
Okay, no matter how obvious the outcome to McDaniel, to the 168 members of the RNC, maybe even to Trump himself, any indication of surrender would be unforgivable. And this is why McDaniel has sanctioned her employees to spread countless demonstrable falsehoods in the week since Election Day. Okay? Honesty and decency have not been hallmarks of republicanism during Trump's presidency. They certainly aren't priorities now. With Trump entering the anguished twilight of his presidency, all that appears to matter for somebody like McDaniel or Cox, the state party chair, who faces an upcoming election of her own, is unconditional fidelity to the president. Right? And then that's basically what's going on here. So you have a party who is either going to be unconditionally loyal, or they're going to be like Van Langenfeld and say, no, you have to vote on principle. And the loyalists obviously outnumber the principle people, but those principle people still exist. And without them, it's a much smaller party, even if they're the minority faction. Mm-hmm. And so welcome to Georgia, because we're going to see that play out in the runoffs.
Yeah. Fine.
And that's why I think it's so important to go over all of this, because what happened in Michigan is crystal clear. It's just that it's happening in all the other states, and it's not crystal clear. But it is here, so you could see what's going on. And this is why you can't get Republicans in public to denounce the president or do anything that you would normally expect Mr. Smith to do when he goes to Washington and he gives his standing speaking filibuster. Yeah. Because that doesn't happen in real life. In real life, I'm 38 and I'm not really qualified for anything else. How am I going to get a job if I don't fully support the president because people won't like me?
I guess so. Yeah. If it doesn't immediately strike you what the translation is from Michigan to Georgia, it's that the sickness that infected Ronna Romney McDaniel has infected the two currently incumbent Republican senators who are running for re-election in these runoffs.
Right, with the extra added attachment that they also have to defend their record of insider trading and being crooks, con people.
Right. I mean, that should sink them on their own ordinarily. But, yeah, essentially they were...
So they have no incentive to play it straight.
It put them in the position of having to attack a staunch Republican Secretary of State to allege that their own elections had been fraudulent somehow. And in the middle of all their tripping over themselves to demonstrate their fealty to Trump, Trump stabs them in the back and says, what did he do? Who was it? Was it Trump himself who intimated that maybe Loeffler's Republican rival in what passed for a primary in her special election, Doug Collins, had actually won. He lost by like 30 points or something like that. But in the fix that put Biden on top in Georgia, they also rigged it against Loeffler, who is now out there loyally saying that the whole thing was rigged, as I said.
Powell, but you can't tell the difference between Sidney Powell and Donald Trump.
You're right. It was. And you can't tell the difference. And that was, I guess, part of the reason why they ended up chucking her from the team, but then denying she was ever on the team, which tells you a little bit more about how stupid this whole thing is. But Loeffler and Perdue were right there and couldn't wait to do what Romney McDaniel was doing in Michigan, plus, of course, pocket a whole lot of cash from insider trading. That won't help either. But, that's the same illness everywhere. Easily translatable. There was someone in every state somewhere, some Republicans, elected Republicans, who could not wait to get on board with the conspiracy theory because they thought it would make Trump like them. And I've never understood whether people think because he's a billionaire, like, he'll give me $1 million if I do. Right. I'm not sure what it is, but they think it's something.
This was an incredibly long story. I mean, it was like a 5-book novel here.
It's like an hour.
A 5-book trilogy.
Yeah.
And there's more in it, which is really interesting. And it talks about what, as Election Day passed and the realization struck that they lost or losing all these cases in court, none of this is going to work. Mm-hmm. And now it's the day of the state canvass. And what do we do now?
Yeah.
Right? The House and Senate top GOP people have already gone to Washington. They've already spoken to Trump. They told him it's no way it's going to happen. Trump is complaining. They go back home. And word is starting to filter through the Republican Party. And this is, again, important because it just signifies how out of touch they are with reality. So they're not really sure what's going to happen now. They're very nervous about the vote that's going to take place in the afternoon. And they're hoping, their big expectation is not so much that they'll vote not to certify, but rather they'll vote to postpone because they can't vote to not certify. If they vote to not certify, it's a felony, and they'll get kicked off the board, and they'll be charged with a felony, and that's bad for their careers. So they're not going to vote no.
Maybe.
Okay. And they'll be replaced, and it won't work. So they're not going to vote no, but they want to postpone. That's their hope.
Okay.
So working off this expectation, Tim Alberta writes, a late lobbying blitz turned on Schinkel. He's the Republican who eventually abstained. He's the one whose wife was part of a lawsuit claiming that there were funny things going on at the TCF Center that we just went over.
His wife, you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody expected
Mrs.
Norm
Schinkel. Who's Mrs. Schinkel?
Who's a postman at Cheers, right? That's his name? Norm?
Yeah.
In the 36 hours preceding Monday's vote, he was inundated with calls and emails and text messages from high-ranking Republican luminaries around the state. Some, such as former Congressman and House Intelligence Chair Mike Rogers, urged him to certify the results in accordance with Michigan law. Others, including McDaniel and Cox and other state party figures, pleaded with him to stand his ground and insist on a 2-week delay. The response they got was universal. He'd promised to do my best and offered a litany of unsubstantiated allegations of fraud, and not everybody bothered contacting Schinkel. That his wife served as a plaintiff's witness in Trump's ill-fated lawsuit against Detroit struck many people not just as a conflict of interest, but as a clear indication he would never vote to certify, which in fact he did. Okay. But when Monday morning arrived, the Michigan MAGA coalition hoped to wake up to news of a postponed meeting on account of Van Langenfeld's resignation, because they figured he can't vote for it. It'll destroy his career. He can't vote against it because that's illegal. So the logical thing they told themselves is this Van Langenfeld fellow will simply resign.
Okay. I can see why they would come to that conclusion. Wrong.
No such luck.
Right. Okay.
Nervously, calls and text messages and email chains began anew, this time directed not toward Schinkel or Van Langenfeld, but to each other. What's going on? Was it postponed? Is it going to go ahead? Is he going to stay silent? Is he off the grid? How do you reach him?
Funny.
How do we put pressure on Van Langeveld? How can we do all of these things?
It's interesting that their conclusion was the only thing he could do other than do the wrong thing. Clearly, you would resign.
Never going to do the right thing. So how can we get him to do the wrong thing? And which of the many ways of doing
That
the wrong
wasn't
thing
even
is
on the
actually
radar.
going to play out?
What if he does what he's supposed to do?
That's what happens when you're not in touch with the reality.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's important to go through this, because again, what happens in Michigan doesn't stay in Michigan.
Right.
Right? Some Republicans didn't want to believe it, but for others, reality began to set in. They'd grown so accustomed to Republicans falling in line, bending a knee to Trumpism, that the notion of somebody acting on his own personal ethic had become foreign, just as you were saying. But the more they learned about Van Langeveld, the more he sounded like just the type of independent thinker who might do this. Some viewed his relative youth as an asset, believing he wouldn't risk throwing away his future.
Yeah.
When they had failed to appreciate was that young conservatives are oftentimes the most disillusioned with the party's drift from any intellectual or philosophical mooring. And as soon as the meeting started, Van Langeveld said, "We're voting to certify."
Oh, okay. To the point.
Right? And then, if this young canvasser's rebellion against the entire Republican Party apparatus was surprising, what came next was all too predictable. Within minutes of the vote for certification and for Schinkel's abstention, which guaranteed his colleague would bear the brunt of the party's fury alone, the fires of retaliation raged in GOP circles. There was immediate calls for Van Langeveld to lose his seat, lose his job in the House of Representatives, where he's a lawyer, to be censured on the floor of the legislature, exile him from the party. Actionable threats against him and his family began to be reported. The Michigan State Police worked with local law enforcement to arrange a security detail, all for doing his job, all for upholding the rule of law, all for following his conscience and defying the wishes of Donald Trump.
Yes. By the way, just by way of distancing, or I guess illustrating the hypocrisy over the years, you remember when they say all for doing his job, upholding the rule of law, you remember I have video of somewhere, one of the chants of the original Brooks Brothers riot was, by the way, rule of law, rule of law.
Exactly. Now, Ron Weiser.
They didn't mean it then either, but okay. Yes.
Ron Weiser, again, our
Ron
usual,
Weasley.
I don't know names, so it's hard to pronounce them properly. I apologize. The former party head, who's made it known he wants to reclaim his old post, was thought to have a strong case against Cox, who's been viewed as unsteady by some GOP elders. But it turns out this former party head recommended Van Langeveld.
Aha. What a jerk.
So, the name Van Langeveld is already so infamous in Michigan Republican lore that those associated with him are at risk of being branded turncoats, too.
Sure. Why not?
So this is how being a Trump Republican plays out and how you split the party.
It's a simple world.
Yeah. So it goes on and on and on about what's happening in Michigan doesn't stay in Michigan. You're going to see this play out in every state. And that's why it's worthwhile just going over this one story. I don't usually do this. We usually have a variety of things to talk about. There's a pandemic going on as well. But this is so indicative of what's going on here. I'm going to throw one pandemic story in here, though, just because I want to complete the picture of Trump's America here.
All right.
Okay. And this comes from Chris Polanski.
That guy. Or
that guy.
Girl.
He's a reporter and anchor for KWGS News, Tulsa's NPR member station.
That guy. All right.
Okay. It's about the Broken Arrow City Council.
Broken Arrow.
Broken
Oklahoma?
Arrow. Remember that TV show?
Yeah. Where are
about the Western guy who got along with the Indians? That was the TV show Broken Arrow. Black and white back in the day when I was a kid. So, Broken Arrow City Council in Oklahoma about to vote on whether they want to pass a resolution strongly encouraging the use of masks. And when I tell this story, think of everything we just told you about Michigan and the GOP there.
All right.
Okay?
Yes.
There was a ton of misinformation about masks and COVID at the last meeting, so they voted not to go with a mask recommendation. Not a mandate, a recommendation.
Okay. Seems fair.
Okay? And because there was so much information at the last meeting, this reporter said, I wouldn't take it as a given that even now it'll pass, but let's see.
All right.
So Michael Gillespie, husband of Counselor Christy Gillespie, says in public comment there's obviously no science proving masks work.
Obviously.
Mask mandates work. This is false, by the way. Masks work and mask mandates reduce spread.
Yes.
He opposes the resolution strongly encouraging the use of masks. It's time to stop being part of the problem. Jason Cohn, the one council person Jason Cohen, a member speaking. You can tell what side they're on because the ones without masks don't support masks, and the ones with masks do. Yes. So you get a pretty good visual right away what's going on here.
Right. It's
time to stop being part of the problem, somebody says. And somebody else comes out and says, I'm anti-face diaper, wearing a Trump shirt. I'm anti-face diaper, and is angry at the Tulsa Health Department, saying that the Tulsa Health Department lies and the CDC lies, and this is the United States of America, and masks don't work.
Okay.
And so you have a number of people coming on and saying this.
All right.
And then you have somebody saying, it's terrible you should make this recommendation because for people to not let in maskless customers is anti-religious and anti-disability discrimination. And it's also practicing medicine without a license. And these are curious members of the public who don't want this. We're not talking about a mandate. We're talking about a recommendation.
Yeah, right. Which you are free to ignore. I mean,
right. The Speaker says she's worried about the resolution will cause more division and walks boldly into stores with mandatory mask policies without a mask on, and employees tend not to say anything. And I want to maintain that status quo.
All right.
We've set an example. This city's been a shining beacon. Don't go back. Elite globalists at the WHO is spreading fear porn. We cannot be dominated by the world globalists. I'm a daughter of the American Revolution. I love my nation. I love God. I love Broken Arrow. Let's not be wimpy sellouts. Why am I live tweeting this, says the reporter? I'm live tweeting it because I have to stick around for the vote, so I have to watch all this stuff anyway.
Sure. Might as well keep yourself occupied.
It's a cold. What are we afraid of? So this is what people are saying. So when you look back and you look at Iowa and you look at South Dakota and you look at Oklahoma and you say, how are these things spiking? Why don't they just go ahead? Where's Kristi Noem coming from? These are the kinds of people that elect Kristi Noem.
Yes. She's powerless without them, but there are people who are willing to do stupid things, and they vote for stupid people, and that's the base, and you got to be stupid in order to motivate the stupid base.
The commenter is an attorney from Tulsa and says he does 100% of his shopping in Broken Arrow because there's liberty and freedom there. Also, no mask mandate. Yeah, if you go to Tulsa, you have to wear a mask. So he shops in Broken Arrow.
What an accomplishment. He lives in Broken Arrow and shops there, too. What a genius.
Right. So some guy made a Nazi Germany comparison. I'm so tired, says the reporter. The resolution isn't a mandate. It's not and it won't be. It's just encouraging people to wear masks, and so everybody gets mad.
Everyone remembers all the masks.
And they voted
Nazis.
not to do it.
Okay. Well, good. Keep dying.
So, again, this is the part of the country.
I'm back to that.
Trump country. This is how they think. This is what they do. And you look at the story about Michigan, and you look at the story about Oklahoma. If you're not from these places, if you're from a place like Connecticut, you scratch your head and say, what's going on here? Well, this is what's going on here. So let me just end by saying this isn't going to be forever. There's a wonderful story that Gene Robinson wrote in the Washington Post today. Want to understand Biden voters? Here's your reading list.
All right. No.
After Donald Trump won in 2016, the media and academia embarked on a numbingly comprehensive sociological and anthropological examination of the Trump voter.
Right. Because we just did weird.
For an hour. Reporters and researchers swarmed to what seemed like every bereft factory town in the industrial Midwest, every hill and hollow of Appalachia, every windswept farming community throughout the Great Plains. I'm sure television crews did, in fact, bring us reports from every single diner in the contiguous United States. At least those where at least one regular patron wears overalls. And you have to have a John Deere hat, also. Never mind that nearly 3 million more of us voted against Trump 4 years ago. Nobody seemed terribly interested in our inner lives. This time, the gap is too big to ignore. 6 million votes. He won back the heartland of Wisconsin, Biden did, Michigan and Pennsylvania, Georgia, for heaven's sake. Logically, then, we should put aside those dog-eared copies of J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy and subject the Biden voter to the same kind of microscopic scrutiny. Venture out of your bubble, Trump supporters, and try to understand how most of America thinks.
Yes. Well, that piece is presaged by 4 years of asking for the same thing, but a good capper for sure. It's a mystery as to why they don't seem to care. I mean, maybe it just has to do with the fact that, if you want to understand the average Biden voter, talk to a normal average person who's like, I'm not a scientist, but science is good. And I don't want to be sick, and I just wear this, and I won't be sick. All right, that's the end of the understanding session. I guess we can all go home now.
Well,
It's just too easy to understand.
I can go home, but you're still here, so you got to talk about something for the next hour.
Can you do?
I'll be here tomorrow, though. We're going to do a little bit more coronavirus stuff, and we're not going to spend the entire hour talking about Trump voters.
We can talk about Trump.
But pay attention to Michigan. What happened in Michigan is important. What happened in Michigan is explainable. It's visible, and it doesn't make Ronna McDaniel look very good. It doesn't make the Republican Party look very good, but at least you know what's going on here, and that should temper your expectations about what to expect from Republicans in Washington, because they're in the same boat.
Okay.
Which is the Titanic.
That seems to explain it. That's true. And the Titanic, if all the luxury appointments were fake and spray painted gold.
And the band played on. All right, that's my story.
All right.
See you on Thursday, which is tomorrow.
Yes.
And we'll see what happens today.
Okay, excellent.
We got this Lansing, Pennsilvania, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Rudy Giuliani, hot mess with Trump showing up. And you haven't seen him, which is great. I did a whole pundit roundup, and I don't even think I focused on Trump.
Well, that's true. So
little on his voters, but he's not in the news anymore. Who cares?
Yeah, right.
Bye.
So, okay, all right. Well, thanks very much, Greg. And I hope we do see you tomorrow. We'll have it'll be a Thanksgiving. You're gonna can I hold you to that Thanksgiving show? You gonna do it?
I don't know.
I'll
do
do
you
it.
Doing it?
I'll do it. I'm not going anywhere. Neither are you. I don't think so.
You do it. I'll do it.
All right. Well, let's do it. We'll keep the people who aren't going anywhere company, so that they're not sad during the morning hours about not going anywhere.
Okay, that's
public service. Excellent. Okay. The music comes shortly if you're looking for a way to duck out without making too much noise, but we don't mind
Abby's going to start barking,
okay,
because it's time for the garbage.
Well, let's hear her. Bring it on. All right. Yeah, it's too bad that they don't come on Thursday. Oh, they wouldn't come for the holiday anyway. We could just have her have a segment. In fact, why don't you tape her barking on your phone and submit it as a...
I could tape it for a whole 2 hours and just do a show called The Abby Show.
Yeah, well, tomorrow's the day for it. Okay, well, thanks again. And, all right, we'll check in with you tomorrow. We'll be back after a short break here, just 1 minute, and then dive into everything else that's crazy and happening, and maybe even about Trump. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg is wrapped up for the day. Speaking of the upcoming appearance now scheduled to happen about 2 hours from now in Gettysburg, Maggie Haberman is, I guess, not on the scene, but talking about the event, tweeting last night, I guess, as the event took shape, that it was confirmed to her by two people briefed on the plans. She's responding to the tweet of Jeremy Diamond. Might as well click through and give you all the correct IDs here. CNN, White House correspondent Jeremy Diamond. But Maggie says some of the aides had tried to talk him out of this. What is this? Here's what Jeremy Diamond has to say. News, Trump is expected to join Giuliani in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania tomorrow. That's now today. Where, GOP, state lawmakers are holding a, quote, hearing. We should clear that up. I mean, it can be an actual hearing. You can do field hearings. Even members of Congress do those from time to time and hold them elsewhere. But I don't think there's any minority members of the committee showing up at this exercise. But they're going to hold what they're calling a hearing on allegations of fraud in the 2020 election. Two sources familiar with the plans tell me, not on his schedule, that this event, on Trump's schedule, that is, but being planned as an unannounced movement, which I'm not really even sure. I mean, I guess that is what it sounds like, but is that an official category of something a president does? Let's see. More from Diamond last night. It would be Trump's first trip outside the D.C. area since Election Day. He's been hiding in his basement. Because it's unplanned, OTR, off the record, I guess, movement. One source cautioned that the plans could change and this could be canceled, but as of now, this is the plan. And then something from the Pennsylvania Senate Republicans page about the hearing. I guess in case you want to see what it is. What are they selling it with when they talk PR about it? Their media advisory, Senate committee to discuss election issues in Pennsylvania. I mean, what else do you want to know about that? They're doing it at 12:30, so you got to wait a little while after the show today allegedly at the Wyndham Hotel in Gettysburg, which I understand is Eisenhower themed hotel in some way. I thought I saw somebody tweeting that this morning. Anyway, what else did Haberman have to say about this thing? Because that's really the end of what Diamond had to say. Let's see. Some advisors, it says, were kept in the dark about this, underscoring how disjointed. Oops, I've lost the place here. We're underscoring how disjointed the president's team has become in the 2 weeks since November 3rd. Others tried telling him it's a mistake. Among other things, Trump is likely to announce a 2024 campaign soon, and this is brand building. That is an interesting thought. And that would get him in the news cycle if he went and he said, I'm announcing I'm going to run in 2024. Whatever. Okay. Just of some interest, seeing that this thing has happened, that he's been counseled against it. I would say there's some chance that he ducks out of this thing and cancels and doesn't show up just because he realizes at the last second, this doesn't do anything for me, unless I am literally ready to announce a 2024 bid, which is something that would, of course, only happen if I conceded this race, which he still doesn't want to do. I don't know. We'll see whether he ducks out of it or not. Okay, other comments that have come in along the way, just for reassuring Greg, for instance, Rebecca Roman's begging us, please do come by and keep everybody company on Thanksgiving Day. I think that's a wise idea. Although she'll be working. Oh, look at that. So she'll be up early. I need you to get me up to speed for the day, even though your mind should be on your work, but I understand what you're talking about. My entertaining show? Really? I have one? Okay. Your entertaining show is the only thing that makes getting up early worthwhile. Don't let me down. I'm reading that more for the audience in my house than anything else. And what are you doing? Why are you getting up and doing that? I don't know. I feel like everybody is stuck in their houses and or working and might like a little company in the morning. And besides which, you can sleep right through it. If you sleep hard enough, you can get right, although it might be time to get out of bed and put the turkey in, but I think we're eating later tomorrow, because we're not having guests or traveling anywhere, so we can eat it at regular dinner time. You've noticed that, I assume, and I assume does everybody do the same thing? Like, for some reason, Thanksgiving dinner is like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I think it's you just can't wait. You're smelling the turkey cooking all day, and skip lunch or whatever because you're too busy cooking everything else and everything in the kitchen is occupied with I don't know what the reasoning is, but I guess if you're not having guests over, you can just make everybody wait until 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. All right, let's see. There's more here. Rebecca has gone on a tear, sent me 2 or 3 things in a row, so I guess other suggestions for other stories. Let's see what we got here. News about Jared and Ivanka considering living either in New Jersey or Florida rather than returning to their perch in Manhattan, probably because they're most unwelcome in Manhattan. And also now they have kids. Their kids have gotten older. They need probably a little more room. And, raising them, running around even in penthouse apartments is kind of a weird environment. Ivanka seems to want to try her best to maintain the illusion of regular American, even if wealthy, regular American upbringing for the kids, and maybe they want a backyard or something like that. And, Jared's roots are in New Jersey. Well, Jared's roots are in prison in New Jersey, but anyway, he might want to move back there, or they could move to Florida and live, in the compound somewhere. I think I understood that there was some plans circulating, I guess, both with the Planning Commission and whoever else the authorities are in New Jersey about doing some expansions of the golf course properties there. They have houses and bungalows and whatnot for the family in the Bedminster Trump golf enclave. And it sounds like they were looking to expand the villas there. I think at one point Trump originally had plans to be buried in a mausoleum that he planned to build on Bedminster, as though people would be making pilgrimages to his grave. Now, of course, that was planned before he was president. Now people will be making pilgrimages to his grave to piss on it and God knows what else, which is actually reminds me, I don't know, did we discuss this story? I thought I saw, I don't know if I put aside a story or not, but I definitely saw some tweets. I'm sure I can track them down. Trump is putting out feelers about the possibilities of getting himself buried at Arlington National Cemetery, which, of course, sends people into paroxysms about the idea of, 5-time draft deferred heel spur Donald Trump being buried at Arlington. But there are a few honored, that's the difference between him and the rest of these honored non-veterans buried at Arlington. I think somebody pointed out to me that William Howard Taft is apparently buried at Arlington, which I don't think I've been to Arlington a couple times. I don't think I ever made a point of looking for William Howard Taft's grave. Maybe we should. It's probably a large grave. Could probably find it. Probably well marked, too. And I don't know. I mean, somebody said it, so I believe it's true because they said it, and that's it. That I haven't checked on it. But he was, of course, in addition to being president, Supreme Court Justice. Was he Chief Justice Taft? I don't even remember whether they gave him the Chief Justice. Anyway, that makes him a somewhat important personage. I, of course, oppose the whole thing for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that I am adamant that there cannot be a state funeral of any kind for Donald Trump, and burying him at Arlington is just a step too far even beyond that. It's worse than giving him just a regular state funeral and then shipping him off to Bedminster to be encased in the walls of the mausoleum there. But giving him a state funeral and burying him at Arlington is just beyond the pale. I think, though, that aside from the ego boost of it, I think that maybe part of the motivation is, I think it means that Trump is becoming aware of the fact that when he dies, people are going to come from all over the place to spit, piss, curse, spray paint, take a sledgehammer to his grave. They can't stand the man, and even in death, they'll be interested in doing what they can to defile his memory, and if that's even a possibility. Defile something, his gravesite, if nothing else. His memory can't be defiled. And it's true. I mean, I desperately would love to do that. One way to prevent doing that, of course, honestly, if he buried himself on the golf course in Bedminster, I'm not going to make it there. So he's pretty safe on that. But then, of course, there was my plan to rent the tanker plane that they used to put out the forest fires and just fill that up with people's donated urine and dump it from above. And there's not a whole lot you can do about that on the ground in Bedminster. But if you get buried in Arlington National Cemetery, I presume it becomes a federal crime to pee on the graves in Arlington National Cemetery, and with good reason, even if it's Donald Trump's grave. But I guess it would make it, relatively well guarded, a federal crime to go and do this sort of stuff. I think it's more important than it being guarded is that it be guarded at no cost to him. If taxpayer funded guarding of his gravesite so that nobody can desecrate it is a great deal for him, and I think that he's literally looking for that out. All right, let's see. Other items in the comments section here that were left behind in the KITM hashtag, a great way to bring something like that to my attention. What else do we have here? Right. So they're thinking of relocating Jared and Ivanka to possibly to New Jersey, possibly to Florida. Rebecca just saying, stay away from California. That's all that's on her list. Speaking of Jared and Ivanka, why don't we just do things this way? Because stream of consciousness, etc. Did I put this aside? I feel like I did, but there's so many. Yeah, okay. I heard this story a while back, and it has made a reappearance in the news thanks to Talking Points memo. They revived the story, which is a great idea because it's a funny story. Jared and Ivanka have also found themselves ejected from, or at least their kids ejected from the exclusive private school that their kids went to in D.C. for the last couple of years. A Jewish day school, by the way, at Jared's behest, and a fairly prestigious one at that. And they ended up getting kicked out because they kept violating, in front of everybody, violating all the COVID protocols. The school's open. The kids are there, at least the youngest kids are there for in-person classes, with the understanding among this, relatively elite group of families paying for their private schooling. They just said, all right, we'll be careful. We'll all stay home when the kids aren't at school, and we'll be careful about things and mask and not be out in public too often and risking ourselves and not do any traveling, etc. And I have a feeling that it wasn't just Jared and Ivanka's family violating the rules, but they violated them most flagrantly. So TPM's headline here: Ivanka and Jared sparked drama at elite elementary school after attending White House super spreader event. That's really the difference between the two of them. There are cameras, them and everybody else, there are cameras tracking their movements, and so there will be media evidence of their attendance at super spreader events, and then going home to the kids and then sending those same kids to the school where at least some of the parents are doing their best to keep their families isolated and COVID-free, and it's got to piss them off, and it does. Summer Concepcion wrote this up for TPM. Ivanka and Jared's attendance at a White House event announcing Judge Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court in late September reportedly caused tension among parents whose children also attend Milton Gottesman Jewish Day School of the nation's capital. That's, I guess, the full name of the school, a private elementary school in the district, according to the New York Times on Tuesday. It might be in the Times that I actually read this thing. Oh, no. Well, that's they would be rehashing it, too, because Tuesday it's still about a week since I read this story, I thought. Anyway, in 2017, the president's daughter and son-in-law enrolled their elder two children in a private elementary school. Kushner and Trump, however, withdrew from the school last month and enrolled their children in another Jewish elementary school in the Washington suburb of Rockville, Maryland. The Jewish Telegraphic Agency, and that might have been where I heard about it, maybe, when did they write about it? Reported that they withdrew, though, the JTA, that because Berman, that's the school that they moved the kids to without saying so. They didn't mention that anywhere here in this write-up. Berman offered more in-person classes during the pandemic versus they got kicked out of Gottesman. Here's the JTA story. It's from November 11th. Amid White House COVID-19 outbreak, Ivanka, Trump, and Jared Kushner pulled their three kids from a D.C. Jewish school. Now, they pulled them at the request of everybody else in that school. Let me go back to TPM's write-up of it, which is depending on the Times' write-up. Times reported on Tuesday that tensions between Trump world figures and parents of the elite elementary school had begun well before the White House event announcing Barrett's nomination. And by the way, it also would have rubbed a lot of people at the Jewish Day School the wrong way, that, the big risk of COVID was coming from the event announcing the replacement of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's, who's going to be filling Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat. That's kind of a stab in the eye to a very proud and intensely Jewish population there. But okay, they are absolutely right to be worried about the COVID first and foremost, if that's what they're worried about, first and foremost, and I believe it. So let's see. The tensions rose when, even well before that event, which preceded President Trump and those in his orbit contracting COVID-19 in early October. So the concerns were well warranted. Anyway, some parents at the school who largely work as public servants and diplomats, that is to say government employees, and they are among the people that the president baselessly accuses of being part of the deep state, of course. Well, the other parents lobbied to refuse admission to the prominent Trump world figures, I guess initially in 2017, but it didn't work. 4 parents, though, told the Times that once their children were admitted, Trump and Kushner tended to violate the, quote, unspoken rule of Washington private school world, the Washington private school world, that is, where parents with heavy security details, they deal with this thing every once in a while, right? Parents with heavy security details generally do everything they can to keep disruption to a minimum. And you can see why that would be troublesome for them. But here's a concrete example of the sort of thing that goes on and the sort of thing that I guess normally families like this try to avoid, but no attempt at avoidance by Kushner and Ivanka Trump. This is a great story right here. According to the Times, one irritated parent recalled that the president's daughter and son-in-law, as well as their entourage, would often occupy the front 2 rows at school-wide events. Now, they might claim that there's some sort of need security-wise to do that, and of course their entourage would be there, and that would include security personnel. But be aware of what we're talking about here. Every time there's a school play, right, and all the other parents are trying or even show up 2 hours to the early to the event to try to grab a seat up front so that they can take pictures of their kid in the school play, they arrive only to find out, no, not allowed to sit here. The entirety of the front 2 rows are reserved for Jared and Ivanka and the 35 people they brought here to break your legs if you try to sit in the front 2 rows and get a picture of your kid. Everybody else in the school has to try and take a picture over Jared Kushner's idiot head to get the picture of their kid on stage, because these front 2 rows are for us. We're the VIPs here. Everybody out of our face. That's not going to go over well in private school world or anywhere. According to the Times, there's more about this. 3 people, which includes 2 who were present, so that's helpful, told the Times about a birthday party that Kushner attended with his children. The kids got invited to a birthday party he brought them, where he requested the host's Wi-Fi password so he could work in the living room. Which, I'm sure he's a busy guy and everything, but if you're taking the kids to the birthday party, it's because you're free to do so. And if you're not, then, I don't know, send the Secret Service or send Ivanka or something. Anyway, he decides he's going to do some work and he wants the Wi-Fi. It seems like a rude thing to do. On the other hand, between friends, I could see it happening. Anyway, the straw broke the backs of parents of the elite elementary school in the fall after Kushner and Trump's appearance at the White House event announcing Judge Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court, which White House coronavirus task force member Dr. Anthony Fauci labeled a COVID-19 super spreader event due to the lack of mask wearing and social distancing among attendees. Parents grew furious at the sight, which prompted school administrators to approach the family about potential COVID-19 exposure of their children. Their youngest child, who was a student at the elementary school at the time, had been attending in-person classes. One person familiar with the discussion told the Times that the couple was reluctant to answer basic questions, such as the last time their children were in close contact with the president, who was, of course, sick with COVID. Carolina Hurley, the White House spokeswoman, issued a dismissive statement to the Times. Unnamed sources attacking the family's decision about what's best for their kids in the middle of a pandemic is shameful, Hurley told the Times. As is true for all families, schooling choices and education are deeply personal decisions, and they owe no one, especially idle gossips, yentas, you might even say, seeking press attention and explanation. Except they absolutely do, and they were seeking to find out whether or not they were adhering to the rules that all the rest of the families were adhering to, and could they possibly be giving their kids COVID-19. And I got to tell you, schooling choices and education are deeply personal decisions for everyone else at that school, too. But just something that never occurred to Carolina Hurley or Jared or Ivanka anywhere along the way. Just a fun story, not super important, but I thought I would include it for you. Let's see. Other things, we're still reading through the backlog of comments here. Another one from Rebecca here from AP. When the COVID-19 pandemic began, Georgia Republican Senator David Perdue sold up to $5 million worth of stock in a company where he once served on the board. Weeks later, after shares nosedive, he bought much of it back, and it's quadrupled in value since. So, fun guy, profiteering off of the pandemic while the rest of you suffer. And by the way, no relief in sight. And the only discussion among Republicans in the Senate of the possibility of offering any further COVID relief, by the way, comes, in their view, has to be coupled with business liability waivers such that anybody who forces their employees back to work or forces them to work without a mask, for instance, so that they don't scare the customers, as was apparently the case at Publix supermarkets down in Florida for a while, and you catch COVID, and let's say, like in the case of this one worker in Publix, you die. Apparently, it's the view of the Republicans that you ought not even to be allowed to file suit. No taking your chances with a jury and letting Publix give its best explanations. You know, I had a little discussion about this overnight on Twitter about it, and it's one of those things. Republicans don't want to take chances in court. They just want to see these cases dismissed out of hand. But the company probably will say, well, early in the pandemic, people weren't sure about the efficacy of masks and et cetera, et cetera. And we weren't sure what we were dealing with. Anyway, the CDC wasn't at that point insisting on masks, so we didn't either. And you can hardly blame us for taking the CDC's advice. Okay, possible defense, right? Just go to court and offer that defense. What are you afraid of? You're pretty sure you're right? You got good lawyers. You're a big corporation. Go ahead, fight it out. What I object to is the idea that you're not even allowed to get to your day in court on this stuff. All right. But lots of craziness swirling around this one. Lock him up is Rebecca's comment about David Perdue on this story. Let's see. Mike Musson also chiming in. Hi, Mike. It's been a while. We haven't heard from you. Speaking about Greg's coverage of the Broken Arrow, Oklahoma hearing, I guess, when these politicians are protesting wearing masks, can we invite the nudist protesters in? No face diaper? Fine. No pants either. See whether that goes over. Let's see. All right, here's word from Greg saying, I guess, the event getting underway, or they're planning for it anyway. Jenna Ellis on her way to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania with Rudy Giuliani. I guess the two of them traveling together, and that's interesting. You never know what's going to happen there. Jenna Ellis and her credentials called into question. Well, it's been the case for months, really, that people have been calling Jenna Ellis's qualifications into question. I just happened to see Josh Marshall doing it this morning. On Ellis, I guess he took a look at her LinkedIn page and was kind of like, has she ever worked as an attorney verifiably for anybody in any capacity? It's not entirely clear. I have wondered about that for a while. I mean, she just says things that are so obviously stupid about the practice of the day-to-day practice of law, about which I know very little because I have not done it myself, but that were even obviously wrong to someone like me. But okay, granted, I've had a little more exposure to it through others, but okay. Let's see. Mike also commenting here, an unannounced movement, whether or not Trump is going to go up to Gettysburg. An unannounced movement sounds like last night's dinner or an election didn't sit well. That's entirely possible too. Greg has sent me another piece here too. Let's see, the tweet of Mark Elliott, who, where is he? Ford Foundation? He used to be the Ford Foundation. Now, Economic Mobility. Is that okay, never mind. Let's take what he has to say, rather than where he works. Firing squads? Question mark. What's happening here? The Trump administration is rushing to approve dozens of 11th hour policy changes. Among them, the Justice Department is fast-tracking a rule that could reintroduce firing squads and electrocutions to federal executions. Oh, how ironic that would be when we finally get around to Trump's treason trial. That would be fantastic. Now, a lot of you are anti-capital punishment. A lot of you I've heard from over the years are anti-capital punishment, but kind of okay with maybe doing that for Donald Trump. I have been advocating alligator pits, laser peeling of his skin from his body. That also is a possibility. Anyway, that's a new one. But firing squads, okay, bringing that back. Very Ceausescu, I must say. That's very interesting and interesting news. We'll take a look at that one. I don't think anybody's going to be a big fan of that one. And let's see, what else have we got? Oh, more from Mark Elliott here. All right, just before our music chimes in, He's answering himself here. It's easy to laugh at the Trump challenges just because they've been so out there. I guess it's about the election stuff. Said Mr. Lee, who I don't know who it is because it's just a tweet. But what's scary is you step back from that a bit and see how many people were willing to go along with it until fairly deep in the process. Does sound like an intriguing thread and a good point to play off of Tim Allen's big write-up that Greg read us. All right, last segment coming up after this 2-minute break, and we'll see what we can cram in and hold your interest with after we return. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let me clear out of the way just one more tweet that caught my eye during the course of the show. I thought this was of some interest. I forget who retweeted it into my timeline here, but let's see. The tweet of Chris Whitfield. Chris Whitfield, I think, just your average kind of person down in Georgia, I guess, or anyway, I was a big supporter, he said, of the Georgia Republicans' changes to election laws, which they assured us would guarantee voter integrity and end illegal voting. I mean, that was a big selling point to Georgia Republicans who believed in the myth that enormous amounts of illegal voting would one day cost them an election, I suppose. Anyway, this is an interesting twist, right? Now they tell me they have written such crappy legislation for the past 20 years of control, and it's actually quite easy to vote illegally, according to their new allegations that they have to make in order to try to have some chance of reversing the results of the election or perhaps even impacting the results of the runoffs for the Senate races. So that's kind of an interesting thing, right? He's actually attached here the tweet of David Schaefer, or Schaffer, I don't know how he pronounces it, but apparently former state senator, now chairman of the Republican Party. I don't know how he pronounces his name, but maybe you do from seeing him on TV, saying, "We requested and were denied an opportunity to view the verification of absentee ballot signatures in September. That is why the entire Republican State Executive Committee is demanding an audit of the absentee ballots," and it includes his letter making that demand. And yeah, Whitfield's comment quite on the money here. I actually used to back all the changes you said you were going to make because you said it was going to preserve the integrity of the vote, and you passed them. There was no one standing in your way. You passed the laws, you implemented the laws, you executed the laws, and now I find out your laws were so crappy that even you say that there was an enormous amount of cheating and illegal voting going on. So I'm wondering why I'm supposed to trust you, one, to get us out of this mess, and two, to figure out what to do going forward. You've already effed it up. So that's an interesting point. Well, I don't know whether Chris Whitfield really and truly has been a Georgia Republican all his life, or for some significant portion of his life, or whether he's just trolling them masterfully, but I'll take it either way. All right, let's see. Other items to catch up on. Let's go over to Pocket here. There's some interesting stuff. Let's share this one here. Vox gave us a Vox-splainer of everything we need to know about something, which was very interesting. The headline grabs the attention, as usual. They do a good job of that at Vox. A disturbing new study suggests Sean Hannity's show helped spread the coronavirus. Now, how can a television show spread the coronavirus? Certainly not through television waves, right? No, of course, it's what he said on the show. Sophisticated new research links Hannity's coronavirus misinformation to, quote, a greater number of COVID-19 cases and deaths. Let's find out how Zach Beauchamp sums this up. Throughout the coronavirus pandemic, media critics have warned that the decision from leading Fox News hosts to downplay the outbreak could cost lives. A new study provides statistical evidence that, in the case of Sean Hannity, that's exactly what happened. How do you figure this stuff out? I guess it could be like contact tracing, right? If people will tell you, yes, I went to that church where 1,000 people got COVID, and then they can conclude that's probably where you got your COVID too. Then maybe they're willing to say things like, well, did you go to church? No, I didn't, but I did watch Sean Hannity the other day, and he said I should lick toilet seats in an ICU somewhere. So I did it, and then you say, okay, we blame him for that. The paper from economists, economists are getting themselves in trouble in their analysis of this COVID-19 thing. I did see something last night. A woman, well, she is a woman, but I mean, primarily for purposes of this story, an economics professor at Brown University. That should have come first. But I happen to see that also that she was a woman. I note that for the record. And it means nothing. Just that's how I remember it. Anyway, she apparently has found her early economic analysis of how the disease is spreading. Not how, she didn't stick to her lane by any means, but, economists are statisticians and can do some advanced math functioning, and that's important in epidemiology too, and she thought she'd give it a crack. And apparently she had some academic background in public health as well. That wouldn't surprise anybody. But anyway, apparently her early conclusions about how lockdowns and quarantines don't work before we found out, one, that they did. And we knew that they did going into it, but before, whatever. Anyway, her academic work has been circulating for months and is like one of the favorites to point to from the Republican side if you're arguing against lockdowns or whatever you want to call them, quarantines, business closures, masking, school closures, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I just note that for the record. I don't know how we're doing in terms of having the economists do the analysis. But if economists' analysis works for Republicans, then it can work for the other side too. So let's hear from Leonardo Burstin, Akash Rao, Christopher Roth, and David, Yanagazawa Drott. My goodness. That was a tough one. Anyway, these 4 economists focused on Fox News programming in February and early March. So a key time here. At that point, Hannity's show was downplaying or ignoring the virus, while fellow Fox host Tucker Carlson was warning viewers about the disease's risks from the standpoint of China's going to kill you, but he was saying something. Using both a poll of Fox News viewers over the age of 55 who haven't died and publicly available data on television watching patterns, they calculate that Fox viewers who watched Hannity rather than Carlson, interesting, I would like to know what the Carlson viewers had to say, particularly later. Anyway, they were less likely to adhere to social distancing rules, and that areas where more people watched Hannity relative to Carlson had higher rates of infection and death. Greater exposure to Hannity relative to Tucker Carlson tonight leads to a greater number of COVID-19 cases and deaths, they write. Okay. One standard deviation increase in relative viewership of Hannity relative to Carlson is associated with approximately 30% more COVID-19 cases on March 14th and 21% more COVID-19 deaths on March 28th. This is a working paper. It hasn't been peer-reviewed or accepted for publication in a journal. However, all things like this are being published now. However, it's consistent with a wide body of research finding that media consumption in general, and Fox News viewership in particular, can have a pretty powerful effect on individual behavior. And, of course, I think we all understand how it could be true. Instinctively, we know. Some of this research has found, for example, that TV consumption can affect decisions as intimate as whether or not to have children. Wow. It makes sense that an older American's favorite TV host telling them they don't need to worry about the coronavirus would cause them to ignore stay-at-home orders and care less about thoroughly washing their hands, which why would you not want to do that anyway? Sean Hannity, his show's so good, I'm not even going to use toilet paper. I'm just going to just wipe with my hands. And I mean, what would he never told people? Did he ever? I understand not taking the whole thing seriously, but I'd be surprised if Hannity told people, don't even wash your hands. But not shocked, because there was another Fox News Channel host who did say that prior to the pandemic, but it was his big thing. It was like his trademark thing. He said, I believe it helps build your immune system not to wash your hands, which I don't know what to tell you. Hopefully all those people die far away from me. Okay. And anybody else who's innocent and shouldn't die. Anyway, what's more, the research I'm reading on because I see Zeynep Tufekci's name come up in this. So what's more, the research design on this particular study seems quite rigorous, according to those scholars who have taken early looks. It's a good paper. They took pains to control for many alternative explanations, writes Zeynep Tufekci, and you got to believe her. She, of course, the professor at University of North Carolina who studies technology and research methods and is right a whole lot. This really looks like a casual effect of misinformation leading to deaths. There's information in here if you'd like to read on about how the study worked. I'm sure it's very interesting. We're not going to spend the time on it today. Any other subheaders that reveal what else might be in here? Why the finding that Sean Hannity killed people is disturbingly plausible, because I like it that way. That's not the real answer, but there's more information there. Vox doing a very thorough job in presenting all this information to you. I will be skimping on it because they've already done it for me. Let's see. Other items of note. Well, let's do a quick mention of this. I don't know what to make of this one, but everyone was sharing this morning. New York Times report that Honesty Hodges, it's Honesty spells her name Honestie, by the way. Maybe you remember her for an unfortunate incident in which she was the victim just a few years ago. Honesty Hodges was handcuffed by police outside her home in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're back to Michigan. When she was all of 11 years old, this was a frightening incident that drew outrage and national headlines in 2017. The bigger news that should spark even more outrage, she is 14 years old and dead of COVID-19. That's the unfortunate news. What a rough time she had of it in her short life. But yes, by the way, just to pique the anger just a little bit more at Michigan and Michigan Republicans, anger we stoked earlier in the show for their reaction to the election. Honesty died at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital in Grand Rapids. I guess that's the DeVos family's attempt at whitewashing all of their larceny and looting in Michigan and elsewhere. We'll give you a hospital to die in after we handcuffed you at age 11. So, all right. Well, I just wanted to get that one on the record because a lot of people are talking about it and it seems tragic and deep and probably worth a lot more time than we have left on the show, but maybe some thoughtful discussion and reading about it later today. Okay. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Joan, who wasn't able to join us yesterday, I think wrote something up about this on the front page of Daily Kos yesterday. I happened to see a Wall Street Journal article on this subject and was thankful that Joan picked it up because I can't get the whole Wall Street Journal story. But Joan's quick take on this and a few other subjects. Trump is burning down everything he can on the way out. This is, of course, to be expected. And she starts off with this part of the story. The sore loser impeached squatter in the Oval Office is never going to concede the election, but he will leave. That she's pretty sure about. And he's going to douse everything with kerosene and light a match on the way out, which ordinarily, wherever Trump's been, Lighting a match is usually a good idea, but if it's full of kerosene, maybe not. That's by doing things like putting a completely unqualified loyalist and conspiracy theory proponents on transition team for a department as critical as defense. And by the way, instructing them not to talk to any Biden transition members. Anyway, it also means further isolating the U.S. by withdrawing from a critical arms control agreement, and several of them. The U.S. officially withdrew from the Open Skies Treaty on Monday, a post-Soviet international agreement that allowed the participating countries, in particular the U.S. and Russia, to conduct surveillance flights over each other's countries. You remember all the verifying that we have to do before we trust anybody? Well, in order to verify, how about some surveillance flights over each other's countries? It's a lot, well, there are satellites that can do the same job too, but this was a commitment to doing this work openly. Not only is Trump officially withdrawing from this treaty, he's getting rid of the U.S. Air Force planes that have been used for nearly 30 years to conduct that surveillance. Now, in terms of buying or burning everything down, she points out, if Biden seeks to re-enter the agreement, he won't have the specially equipped planes with which to do it. A Trump administration official told the Wall Street Journal that the planes are being classified as excess defense articles, ready to ship off to other countries. We've started liquidating the equipment, the officials said. Other countries can come purchase or just take the airframes. They are really old and cost prohibitive for us to maintain. That's the excuse. We don't have a use for them anymore. Congress has already, of course, appropriated over $40 million of the estimated $250 million for replacement planes, although then Defense Secretary Mark Esper decided in July to cancel the program to buy new planes. With funds already appropriated, it is possible that the purchase could go forward, but it's unclear how simple rejoining the treaty will be if the Biden administration chooses to do so. Back in May, Biden reiterated that he supported the Open Skies Treaty as a senator because I understand the United States and our allies would benefit from being able to observe on short notice what Russia and other countries in Europe were doing with their forces. So we're not sure whether or not that's his intention to rejoin. I don't know whether, who knows, maybe Russia too will end up withdrawing from the treaty and either wouldn't allow us to rejoin or would make it less than worthwhile for us to rejoin anyhow. Just one of those burn it all down on your way out tactics that he's got. But by the way, it just sort of plays into my other crazy theory about, isn't it odd that, or wouldn't it be weird if after losing the election, Trump just stopped doing most of the high-level executive functions, not in the medical sense, but in the medical sense too. His high-level executive function has probably been out of order for some time. But I mean, actual presidential functions, like for instance, monitoring the skies, not only over Russia, but our own airspace. Russia apparently makes a frequent habit of making purposeful incursions into Alaskan airspace, for instance. Usually the theory is that they're just testing American air defenses, and when we scramble fighter jets to put them up there and escort them out of American airspace, they willingly turn around and go. Just, mission accomplished, just testing to see how long it takes and what you send and get some idea of what it's like to violate your airspace and what happens. I was just wondering, what if he actually, in addition to just not doing anything and going golfing all the time, what if he actively said stuff like, you know what, don't intercept Russian bombers when they fly into Alaskan airspace. Just let it go. Everyone would wonder, what the hell is that about? Like, what do we think that we don't think they'll drop their bombs, right? We don't think they'll land and try to invade, right? I mean, I guess that's not it. But aren't we supposed to, isn't it a good exercise for us in readiness terms to continue to do this? But if he were ordering such a thing, and he is commander-in-chief, I was just curious, like, what would people from, the Alaska Air National Guard or the Air Force do if they were, for some reason, ordered to stay on the ground, ordered grounded, and say, let the Russians fly over, let them land, let them drop bombs. I don't even know what, if it's just a theoretical question, what do you do as a member of the military when you get an order like that? I assume you could say, well, is it an illegal order? I don't have to follow it. But I don't know if it's that easy to figure out whether it's illegal to order people not to go up and intercept incoming foreign aircraft. I don't know. I have no idea whether anyone would consider that illegal. All right. Well, that I thought was very interesting and worth keeping an eye on just because these people are crazy. Let's see. Other items that I have put away. Oh, yeah, there's a couple of items. I guess I'll have to wait until tomorrow until I can figure out whether or not people want me to mention their name on the air, along with the very informative and interesting comments that they sent me via email. I will at least acknowledge one quick note that I guess we can keep it relatively anonymous and say Dave R. has sent me this one. Mistake yesterday, I guess I was speaking off the cuff about Dan Rather's piece that Brian Monroe read us, and I was saying, oh, well, Brian's Canadian. Maybe it's appropriate to hear from Dan Rather, because isn't he from up in the upper plains near Canada? And the answer is no, he's not. He's apparently, I think it's from Houston, Dave tells me. I was thinking of Tom Brokaw, who was from the Dakotas, I believe. And so it wasn't him. It was the other staid news guy that you might have grown up in the 80s with that I confused him for. Okay. So, well, thanks to Dave for that one and straightening me out after the show. Let's see. A couple other things that we can cram in here before it's time to go, I think. Let's see. Interesting note here from the Washington Post. Really, the headline will do it. Nearly a sixth, 1/6, 1 divided by 6, right? 1/6 of the Senate Republican caucus has tested positive for coronavirus. I think that's pretty interesting, too. Maybe they were all listening to Sean Hannity, and certainly they were taking bad advice, and they got themselves sick, including Rick Scott here in the picture with Kelly Loeffler, both of them COVID positive as well. Let's see. Other important news here. Let's see. Shall we do this one or save it for tomorrow? I'll save that one for tomorrow. I have posited on Twitter and elsewhere, let's throw this in there prediction-wise, now that all of these certifications are coming in, even from the states where Republicans intended to contest or delay certification, might even, we're just wondering what else can they do, if there's anything else for them to do. I don't think there's anything that would be effective in reversing the results of the election, but I do think there's opportunity for mischief making, and I've been wondering whether, now that even with the certifications in, does anybody believe that the certifications, for instance, would make, what was I going to say? I got distracted here for a second. But does anybody think that certification would dissuade idiots? That's just the general question. Will it dissuade idiots? Specifically, I'm thinking of idiots like Louis Gohmert, for instance, or Rand Paul. Would it dissuade them from making objections to the electoral vote count on January 6th that everybody else has given up and that the certifications are in and people have taken principled stands, et cetera, et cetera? Will that matter to Louis Gohmert? So that when they're counting the votes, does it stop Louis Gohmert from standing and saying, I object to the inclusion of any state or the following states or whatever it is in the electoral count here because blah, blah, blah made up crap? And you all maybe remember from 2000 and 2004 how that goes when you're counting the electoral votes in the joint session of Congress, and the presiding officer, in this case, will be Mike Pence. We'll ask them, that's all well and good, but is your objection in writing? Yes, it is. And has any senator joined in signing your objection? And now we have, the ranks of the Republican Senate caucus are chock full of idiots who probably would sign on to that thing. Mike Lee might, I don't know. He might try to avoid it at this point. Rand Paul, probably always game for something that stupid. I doubt that Mitch McConnell makes himself available for something like that, just because why bother when there's other people doing it. But, any number of kooks could present themselves to do that job. And I wonder whether they will. Now, I think the outcome of it at worst is they object to including, the electoral votes of Michigan and Georgia and Arizona and whatever. They throw it all in there, trying to bring Biden down below 270, let's say. That's like their only hope for getting something done with it. At that point, the House and Senate would break up back into their respective chambers, go back and vote on what are we going to do with these certificates and these electoral votes. And if the Republican Senate votes as Republicans have acted to this point, maybe they vote no, we don't accept them. But Louis Gohmert goes back to a House which is majority Democratic, and they're not voting. In this instance, they wouldn't be voting as state delegations. That's only if they're looking to choose a president where there's been a tie or an inconclusive result in the Electoral College. In other words, they would only get to that stage if the challenge to the electoral votes or the certificates succeeds, but it wouldn't succeed because it would fail in the House. The House would come back and say, we will accept these electoral certificates. The Republican Senate, let's posit, I think in reality, at this point, they'd give up and they too would vote, yes, we accept them. But if they decided to do it just straight on partisan lines, they'd come back with a no vote. And then I'm not certain how you resolve that difference. It's never happened. But I think what it would come down to, according to, the regular rules of interpreting these things, which also might be out the window forever, it would be the result is inconclusive. There's nothing we can do. No conclusion has been reached. At worst, let's say that means, all right, if that's interpreted as so therefore these votes don't count, that somehow it actually, the measure wins, the objection wins because there's no agreement. Well, I guess at that point, then you would, I don't know what you would do. I guess at that point you agreed that now there's not going to be a president unless, or there's nobody has a majority of the electoral vote count. Then it would bounce to the House to vote by delegation on who's going to be the president. But I don't think you even really get to that. I think a deadlock between the House and the Senate just means inconclusive, and you can continue the fight, and they might even have to go back and ballot again and again and again and try and negotiate some settlement. But they only have from January 6th to January 20th to do it. After January 20th, there's a vacancy in the presidency, and this eventually resolves itself by saying, okay, the House and Senate cannot come to agreement. They're not going to broker an agreement between them as to who's going to be the president. The Democrats in the House would simply never, there's no reason to give any ground on this stuff, because when January 20th rolled around, the succession statute would hand things to Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. So, like I said, it doesn't go anywhere, but it's not that the idea that this would succeed in installing Donald Trump or any other Republican as president. The idea is that they can begin to lay the groundwork for normalizing doing these things all the time in the future, and that every election and every contest post-election can, at this point, you can expect Republicans to say, it doesn't matter that I lost. It doesn't matter that I lost by 1 vote, 10 votes, 50,000, 500,000 votes, as we found out about Lauren Culp in Washington yesterday. And more on Culp's background was emailed to me the other day, too. Maybe we can share that by tomorrow. But this means, this becomes a part of the process from now on, that Republicans will literally throw any wrench into the gears that they can just because they like doing it. They love chaos. Will this happen? All right. Well, it's worth thinking about. And maybe the fact that it cannot succeed is even more reason to expect to see Louis Gohmert and maybe Rand Paul pulling something like this. They know there's no cost to it immediately, but the cost is, of course, in the long term. Just continuing to tell people that there's no reason to believe in the power of our elections and our ability to select our own leaders. And if they don't select Republicans, then it certainly shouldn't be believed. And it gets worse and worse from there. All right. Time to wrap things up and hand things over to Justice for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. I guess we'll just make at least a quick mention of Paul Waldman's write-up in the Post All I'll tell you is the fact that, it's not written up in post. It's his tweet. Usually he would write it up in post. The Trump administration has inserted serial fraudster John Lott, the gun fraudster, into the Justice Department, according to a Politico article that perhaps we can examine a bit tomorrow. Just wanted to sort of make you aware of his presence in the last days of the Justice Department under the Trump administration. Maybe he's embedding him in a civil service job from which it should be ordinarily, under real rules, difficult to root him out. All right, what's Justice got on tap next? Let's see. The life and legacy of former New York City Mayor David Dinkins, about whom we have failed to mention anything. Right, very good. Mired in Rudy Giuliani's white grievance politics, and so timely to bring that up as well. Let's see. What other things? A federal judge has slapped down a lame duck Trump ploy to force the elderly into death trap nursing homes. I'm glad to see that won't be happening. What else? We'll tell you more next.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
How about the International? Germany warned that anti-Semitism is emerging as a common position among people protesting the pandemic lockdown. What an opportunity. And for the first time in its history, a New Zealand soldier is charged with espionage. Geez, that is interesting. I wonder who he's spying for. Let's find out.